Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome to a brand new series I'll be doing here on my channel. I'm gonna call it Have You Heard? Where I talk about different manga you might not have heard of yet. I've collected over 100 different manga across different genres, about 20 from shonen, seinen, and action, which I've grouped together for the first batch. And later on, I'll be covering slice of life, sci-fi, horror, and comedy. Each video will follow the same structure: a quick intro, a look at the art, the power or magic system for action series or theme for non-action ones, the story, and finally, I'll explain how exposition and information are handled. So, have you heard of Petals of Reincarnation? Petals of Reincarnation is a manga written and illustrated by Mikihisa Konishi, and it follows our main character, Toya Shinji, as he searches for talent. Now, in my opinion, this manga kind of embodies that great concept, rough execution feeling. There are a few characters who just plainly don't need to exist, and a lot of setups that get changed or dropped a few chapters later. And sometimes the manga even skips over key moments entirely. I'll explain that later, but first, let's talk about the art. Petals of Reincarnation has a very distinct style, and I really like how it uses the flower petal motif throughout. It's a consistent creative visual theme, and one thing I do love is how the characters' past identities gradually manifest in their current selves. It really sells the idea that they're becoming more like the historical figures they're based on. The best example of this is Schrodinger, who literally turns into a cat. My one gripe is that Konishi seems to really enjoy using that chibi or exaggerated art style. It pops up a bit too often for my taste, but overall I genuinely like the artwork. Highlights include the sword techniques from characters like Musashi and Jubei, and the manga does an awesome job with distortion effects, especially when Newton uses his powers. When all alone in my chair, This manga's power system is wildly creative. Everything begins with the branch of reincarnation, an item that returners, the term for people who use them, use to gruesomely slash their own throats, gaining a talent from a person in history. Some powers are simple, like Haito, who inherits Musashi's dual sword talent and becomes a master with 2 blades, but others are far more complex and fascinating, like Schrodinger. Because his power is tied to the idea of being both dead and alive, Schrodinger can choose between parallel universes, essentially picking the version of reality that benefits him most. For example, when someone shoots him, he can simply choose the version of reality where he wasn't shot. It's confusing, but also incredibly cool, and one of the most creative powers I've seen. Another interesting angle is the evil returners, also known as sinners. Their powers are based on infamous murderers or historical criminals. For example, there's one based on Nostradamus, who can predict the future, and another inspired by Albert de Salvo, whose ability involves strangulation. It's dark, but it is undeniably unique. I got up my map and it shows someplace I wanted to go. Alright, next I'm gonna talk about the story, and I will warn you, there is basically spoilers. I talk about roughly the first 1 to 27 chapters, which is quite a lot. It's about, what is that, like a quarter of the series? But I do talk about quite a bit. The series begins with Toya searching for talent and trying to understand what it means. And later we learn that this obsession stems from constantly being compared to his brother Seiya by their parents. It turns out that Seiya is actually a reincarnator, specifically Leonardo da Vinci, and his talent, Universal Vessel, allows him to copy any other ability. Because of this, Seiya distanced himself from Toya, afraid that his brother would discover the truth, and deep down, Seiya just wanted to be a big brother that Toya could be proud of. During his journey, Toya meets Haito and later crosses paths with John Fish. We learn about Haito's tragic backstory: abandoned as a child, raised by a kendo master, but shamed for lacking talent. When she discovers the branch of reincarnation, she uses it to surpass her father, but it ends up crippling him in the process and getting banished. Her goal is to become the perfect returner, which is someone who never reverts to their old self. And this is one of the things I was talking about, because it just kind of happens and there's no build up to it, but I'll get back to that. Later on, we meet Ko, a former member of the group known as the Forest of Greats, which is basically the main group of characters that you see for pretty much most of the manga, who's now the leader of the sinners. This leads to a massive battle between the two groups. Through this fight, we learn about Ko's past and how he once tried to help the sinners control their darker impulses, but the Forest of Greats planned to wipe them all out, so Ko decided to stand with the sinners, viewing them as his companions. Eventually, Seiya is killed by Ko, and Toya feels bittersweet relief. He finally understands his brother. But a few chapters later, it's revealed that the leader of the Forest of Greats plans to exterminate all non-returners, believing they're all potential future sinners. That's a rough rundown of chapters 1 through 27. And finally, let's talk about how the story handles exposition and information through its art. This part is kind of subjective. It really depends on how you read and interpret things. But overall, I think the manga does an okay job at balancing what it tells you versus what it shows. There are some genuinely weird and completely weird, but solid plot twists and clever reveals. My main complaint is that the early chapters simply jump around too much, skipping over moments that deserve more build up. Still, the way information is presented and hidden is surprisingly moderate in the best way possible. It's the most medium, in the middle, partial, fair, third-rate pacing I've ever seen, and it makes for a rewarding read if you like weird stories that include problematic characters. But that's all for now, guys. If you enjoyed this and will tune into the next Have You Heard, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next Have You Heard. But one last thing.
Fear God, love Jesus. Peace.
In case I don't see ya, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.